My parents wrapped a deed in Christmas paper and handed my condo to my sister like it was a sweater. They never asked who actually owned it. By New Year's, I'd signed papers that turned their generosity into the most expensive lesson of their lives. Before we jump back into today's story, I have some exciting news. We have officially launched a brand new channel called Tales Beneath Skin. If you can't get enough of juicy Reddit drama, this is exactly what you've been waiting for. We're sharing the wildest real stories from real people, featuring insane relationship drama, unbelievable family feuds, and epic revenge. And we never leave you hanging. We track down every single update and plot twist so you get the complete story and the final resolution all in one place. Make sure to subscribe to Tales Beneath Skin right now so you don't miss out. You'll find the link in the video description, the pinned comment, and the collaboration tag. Now, back to the story. I had just paid off the last of it. Not the mortgage that was already gone, killed 2 years early by every overtime weekend and every skipped vacation I'd quietly stacked up. No, on the morning of December 24th, I made the final payment on the renovation loan. The new kitchen. The refinished oak floors I'd sanded myself one knuckle-bleeding Sunday at a time. The little built-in bookshelf in the bedroom that the contractor said couldn't be done, and I'd found a way to do anyway. 11 years. That was how long I'd owned the condo on Bellwether Lane. 11 years from the terrified 23-year-old signing closing documents with a hand that wouldn't stop shaking, to the woman standing in her own paid-off home with a cup of coffee and a stupid, private smile on her face. I remember thinking, now it's really, finally, completely mine. I want you to hold onto that sentence, because in about 6 hours, my own mother was going to look me in the eye and tell me it had never been mine at all. I drove to my parents' house that evening with a car full of presents and a heart that, God help me, was actually light. Christmas Eve in the Whitfield house was a tradition older than I was, the same crocheted stockings, the same overcooked ham, the same arguments about whether the lights on the tree should blink. I'd hosted my own quiet Christmases for years, but I always came home for the eve. That was the deal. That was family. Crystal was already there when I arrived, of course. My younger sister had a gift for arriving exactly early enough to be helpful in front of our mother and exactly late enough to skip the actual work. She was curled on the good couch with a glass of wine, and beside her sat a man I'd met exactly twice. Trent. He stood when I came in, which I'll admit threw me, because nobody in my family stands for anybody. Diana, he said, taking my hand in both of his. The famous big sister. Crystal talks about you constantly. His smile was very white and very even, like a row of bathroom tile. All good things, I hope, I said. Mostly, he said, and laughed at his own joke before anyone else could decide whether it was one. Dinner was dinner. Mom fussed, Dad carved, Crystal told a long story about a job interview that I suspected had never happened, and Trent agreed with everything my mother said in a way I found mildly nauseating. I helped clear the table. I always helped clear the table. Then came the gifts. We did them the same way every year, youngest to oldest, one at a time, everybody watching. I'd brought good ones that year. A cashmere scarf for Mom, a tool set for Dad I knew he'd been eyeing. For Crystal, a leather portfolio for the job hunt she was perpetually almost starting. And then my mother reached under the tree and pulled out a flat, rectangular package wrapped in silver paper, and she handed it not to me, but to Crystal. This one's special, Mom said, and her voice had the trembly, theatrical warmth she saved for moments she'd rehearsed. Your father and I have been talking about this for a long time, about fairness, about making sure both our girls are taken care of. Crystal peeled back the paper. Inside was a manila folder. She opened it, frowned, and then her whole face changed, lit up like a struck match. The condo, she breathed. You're giving me the condo. The room went underwater. I looked at my mother. I looked at the folder. I could see, even from across the room, the familiar shape of a property document, and worse, I could see that someone had typed up something that wanted very badly to look like a transfer of ownership. Bellwether Lane, my mother confirmed, beaming. It's a wonderful starter home for a young couple, and Diana, well, you've always been so capable. You don't need our help the way your sister does. This just makes things even between you girls. I set down my fork very carefully because the alternative was to drop it. "Mom," I said, "that's my condo, I own it. I have owned it for 11 years. You can't give away something that isn't yours." And my mother looked at me with the patient, pitying smile of a woman who has already decided she is the reasonable one in the room. And she said the sentence I will hear in my head until the day I die. "Sweetheart, we put the down payment in. We've always considered it ours. We just let you live there." That was the moment the warmth left me completely, and something colder and far more useful took its place. I didn't shout. I think everyone in that room expected me to, and there's a part of me, even now, that wishes I'd given them the explosion they were braced for, because at least an explosion is a thing people can dismiss. "Oh, Diana, you know how she gets." Instead, I went very quiet, and quiet was something the Whitfield family had no defense against. "Tell me about this down payment," I said. My father, who had not said a word, suddenly became fascinated by his napkin. My mother's smile flickered. "When you bought the place," she said, "we helped, you know we did." "You gave me $4,000, I said. 11 years ago, as a graduation gift, I have the card you wrote. The condo was $310,000 at the time. My down payment was $31,000, and I have every single record of where that money came from because I'm the kind of person who keeps records. The $4,000 you gave me went toward my closing costs, and I thanked you for it, and I meant it." I paused. "It did not buy you a house." "It's not about the exact figures," my mother said, in the tone of someone for whom figures had become inconvenient. "It's about nothing but the figures," I said. Crystal was clutching the folder to her chest like I might lunge for it. "You can't just take this back," she said. "Mom and Dad gave it to me. It's mine now." And here is where I first noticed the key. I keep my keys on an old leather fob, worn soft and dark, that I've carried since my very first apartment, a one-room place with a radiator that screamed. The brass key to the bellwether condo hangs on it, dented and ordinary. When Crystal said it's mine now, my hand went to my pocket and closed around that key without my deciding to do it, the way your tongue finds a sore tooth. A key is a strange thing, I thought. People believe that holding a key means owning a door, but a key is just metal. It doesn't appear on any title. It doesn't sign any deed. My sister was sitting there holding a folder of paper that meant nothing, convinced she held the door, and not one of them understood that the only thing that decided who owned that condo was a record sitting in a county office with exactly one name on it. Mine. Where did this paperwork even come from? I asked, nodding at the folder. Who drew this up? Crystal and Trent exchanged a glance. It was fast, but I caught it. I've spent 12 years in a law office watching people exchange exactly that kind of glance across a conference table. "Trent helped," Crystal said. "He does property stuff. He knows how all this works." "Does he?" I said. Trent spread his hands with the easy confidence of a man who has never once been the smartest person in the room but has always been the loudest. "Diana, look, I get that this is emotional. Family and money, it's a powder keg, am I right? But your folks own the underlying asset, and frankly, the smart move here is to keep this in the family, restructure it, maybe set up a little entity around it. I do this for a living. I could honestly help all of you optimize this." Optimize? He said it the way some men say a woman's name. I drove home that night and let myself into my own front door with my own brass key, and I stood in the dark kitchen I had paid off 12 hours earlier, and I did not cry. I made tea. And I started thinking. To understand why this cut the way it did, you have to understand what I'd been to that family. I was the one who showed up. When Dad had his knee replaced, I was the one who drove him to physical therapy 3 times a week for 2 months, rearranging my schedule, eating the lost income. When Mom decided the church needed her to chair the rummage sale, I was the one who hauled boxes every weekend for a month while Crystal had a thing. When my grandmother was dying, I sat with her in that beige hospital room reading her the gardening catalogs she loved, and I was the one holding her hand at the end while my sister was on her way. And Crystal, God, I love her. That's the part that hurt. Crystal was the sun the whole family orbited. Crystal's small triumphs were trumpeted. Her many failures were quietly absorbed. The job she lost was always a bad manager. The lease she broke was always a bad landlord. The money she borrowed and never returned was always a one-time thing. I had loaned her $8,000 over the years that I will never see again, and I'd stopped expecting it back, and I'd never once made her feel small about it, because that's what you do for a sister. So when my mother said, "You've always been so capable, you don't need our help," she meant it as a compliment. That was the horror of it. In her mind, my reward for a lifetime of being reliable was that I got to be the one who gave things up. Crystal's reward for a lifetime of taking was that she got to receive. That was fair. That was even. That was the math my mother had been quietly doing my whole life, and I was only now seeing the full ledger. And into that family, into that soft, exploitable softness, walked Trent Calloway. I looked him up that very night, because looking things up is, quite literally, my job. He called himself the founder of Calloway Property Mastery. His website was all stock photos of men in suits shaking hands in front of skyscrapers that had nothing to do with him. He ran wealth-building intensives, weekend seminars, $400 a head, where he taught ordinary people how to leverage other people's assets into generational wealth. Other people's assets. I read that line 3 times, but it was the small inconsistencies that made the back of my neck prickle. On his website's bio, he claimed he'd built a multi-million-dollar portfolio by age 30. But over Christmas dinner, he'd mentioned offhandedly that he'd gotten started in real estate just a few years back. Both couldn't be true. On the seminar page, he claimed to be based in 3 different cities. His LinkedIn listed a degree from a university whose registrar, I happen to know from a prior case, had no record of granting that degree at all. And there was the way he'd asked Crystal, twice during dinner. I'd noticed it even before the gift, little questions. Casual ones. "So the Bellwether place, that's fully paid off now, right? Your sister did all the renovations herself, so there's real equity in there." Questions about a property that supposedly had nothing to do with him. A man who teaches people to leverage other people's assets had wandered into a family with one very valuable, fully paid off, sentimentally entangled asset. And he was dating the daughter holding the folder. I sat at my kitchen table with my brass key on the wood in front of me, turning it over and over, and I understood with perfect clarity that this Christmas gift had not been my mother's idea at all. For 3 days after Christmas, I did nothing. That was the hardest part, the doing nothing. My family read my silence as defeat. Crystal posted a photo on her social media of herself standing in front of my building, captioned "New Beginnings." My mother sent me a text that said, "I hope you'll come around and see this is for the best. We're a family. Families share." My father sent nothing, which was, in its way, the loudest message of all. But I wasn't doing nothing. I was doing the most important thing a person in my position can do, which is getting the order of operations exactly right. Here is what every one of them had forgotten, or more accurately, had never bothered to learn. A property deed in this country is not a story you tell at the dinner table. It is a recorded legal instrument. The condo at Bellwether Lane had exactly one name on its title, recorded at the County Registry of Deeds 11 years ago and never altered since. That name was Diana Marie Whitfield. No co-owner. No lien holder but the mortgage company, and that mortgage was discharged. No trust, no joint tenancy, no family understanding, with any legal weight whatsoever. My parents had handed my sister a folder of papers that a failed seminar grifter had typed up on a laptop. It had no notary, no recording, no signature from the actual title holder, which is to say, it had all the legal force of a child's drawing of a $100 bill. I knew this not because I'd looked it up, but because it was my life. I'd spent 12 years as a commercial real estate paralegal, and 3 of those years I'd also held an active real estate license, picking up the occasional sale on weekends because I liked the work and I liked the independence. I knew title law the way a surgeon knows where the arteries are. The very thing my mother had dismissed me with, "You've always been so capable," was the thing that was about to matter most. I called Paul Nguyen on the 27th. Paul had been my mentor when I started at the firm, a senior partner now, semi-retired, the kind of lawyer who could read a contract the way other people read a menu. He'd taught me everything, and more than that, he'd believed in me back when I was a kid afraid of my own ambition. "Diana," he said warmly, "merry belated Christmas. To what do I owe?" "Paul," I said, "I need to talk to you as a client, not a friend. And I need to know if what I'm about to do is clean." There was a pause, and I could practically hear him sitting up. "Tell me everything." So I did: the folder, the down payment lie, Trent, the seminars, the questions about my equity. When I finished, Paul was quiet for a moment, then he said something I'll never forget. "Diana, legally this is the simplest thing in the world. You own the condo outright. You can sell it tomorrow, today, to anyone you want, for any price you want, and there is not one thing they can do to stop you. The paperwork they handed your sister is meaningless." A pause. "The question isn't can you, the question is whether you're sure you want to." "I'm sure," I said. "But Paul, I don't just want to sell it. I want to understand what I'm dealing with first. The boyfriend, I don't think this was my mother's idea. I think someone planted it." "Then before you sign anything," Paul said, "find out exactly who you're dealing with. Because a man who teaches people to leverage other people's assets has usually leveraged a few before." That was when I stopped being a victim of my family's Christmas and started being the only person in the room who knew the rules. I had a real estate license. I had access to property records, professional databases, and a network of agents and title officers I'd worked with for over a decade. And I had a name: Trent Calloway. I started pulling threads. The first thread came loose almost immediately. I ran Trent Calloway through the property records database. I had legitimate professional access to, the same one I used every day at work. A man who claimed a multi-million-dollar portfolio should have appeared as the owner of, well, properties. Plural. He owned nothing. Not a condo, not a lot, not a parking space. 0 recorded real estate holdings under his name in 3 states, but he appeared in the records in a different way, as a defendant. 2 civil judgments against him in the past 4 years, both from former students of his seminars who'd sued, alleging he'd convinced them to put their homes up as collateral for investment partnerships that evaporated. 1 judgment for $31,000, 1 for over 90. Both unpaid. I sat back in my chair and felt the whole shape of it click into place. Trent didn't invest in property. Trent talked vulnerable people into pledging the property they already had, and then it vanished. And my sister, holding a folder, standing in front of my paid-off building, captioning photos "New Beginnings," was the most vulnerable person he'd found yet. She wasn't his partner. She was his next mark. The condo wasn't a gift to her. It was bait he'd help her reel in, so he could help her optimize it. I could have gone straight to the deed and sold it, but I didn't want to just win. I wanted Crystal to see. Because under all the favoritism and the borrowed money and the missed hospital visits, she was still my little sister, and she was about to be ruined by a man she thought was building her a future. So I called her. Not to fight. To plant one seed and watch what it did. "Crystal," I said, "I've been thinking, maybe you're right, maybe we should keep the place in the family." I let that sit. Trent mentioned setting up an entity, a partnership around the condo. I'd want to understand the structure first. Could you ask him to send me the details? What does he want me to sign? The silence on the line told me everything. Then, too quickly, "Oh, yeah, totally, he can explain it way better than me. He says the smart thing is to put the property into an LLC and then use it as collateral to free up capital, and," she stopped. "Why are you being nice about this all of a sudden?" There she was. Even Crystal, who never met a free thing she didn't take, felt the wrongness of it. "Crystal," I said gently, "has Trent asked you to sign anything yet, or to put your name on anything? A loan, an application, a partnership?" A long pause. "There's a form," she admitted, "for the LLC. He said it's just routine. He said you'd be difficult about it." He said you'd be difficult about it. He'd been salting the ground against me before I'd even made a move. Isolating me the way men like him always isolate the one person who might see clearly. "Don't sign it," I said. "Please, just don't sign anything for 2 days. Come to lunch with me tomorrow, just us. No Trent. And I'll show you something, and then you can decide whatever you want." She came, That alone surprised me. I laid the two judgments on the table between us, the court records, the named victims. I watched my sister read the words failed to disclose, induced to pledge her primary residence, funds never invested. I watched her face go from defensive to confused to a kind of dawning, sickening understanding. "This is fake," she said, but her voice didn't believe it. "He told me people sue successful men all the time," he said, his ex-business partner. "There's no business partner, Crystal. There's no portfolio. There's no skyscraper. There's just this." I tapped the page. "And there's a paid-off condo he found out about, dating a woman he could talk into anything." She didn't cry. Not then. She just stared, and in a very small voice, the smallest I'd heard from her since we were children, she said, "He told me you'd try to turn me against him." "I know he did," I said. "That's the oldest trick there is." I thought that would be the end of it. I should have known better, because men like Trent Calloway do not lose a mark quietly. They have too much practice in the precise mechanics of doubt. Crystal went home that night shaken, but Trent had a 48-hour head start of poison already in her ear, and by the next morning he'd flipped the whole board. I know this because Crystal called me, and her voice had hardened back into the defensive shell I knew so well. "I talked to Trent," she said. "Those lawsuits are public record, Diana. Anyone can be sued. That doesn't make him guilty of anything. The cases were settled." "They weren't settled, Crystal. There are unpaid judgments. He says you've always been jealous of me. He says you can't stand that for once I'm the one getting something. He says you'd rather sell the condo to a stranger than let your own sister have a home. A breath. Is that true? Would you really sell it out from under me?" And there it was, the move. He couldn't discredit the evidence, so he'd reframed me. He'd taken the one true thing that I legally could sell that I might, and weaponized it into proof that I was the villain. He'd made my power into my guilt. In the background of the call, I heard him, murmuring, coaching her in real time, feeding her the lines. I heard him say, low, "Ask her if she even loves you." That was the moment any hesitation I had left went cold and quiet and gone. "Crystal," I said, "I'm going to send you one more thing, and then I'm going to do what I'm going to do, and you'll understand it wasn't about you." It was never about you. I hung up and I called Paul. "He's regained control of her," I told him. "Evidence isn't enough. He's better at her than the truth is." "Then you need a witness," Paul said. "Documents convince the mind. A person convinces the heart." So I found one. The $90,000 judgment had a name on it. A woman named Renata Salas, 2 towns over. I wrote to her carefully, honestly, as one person who'd been targeted reaching out to another. I told her my sister was about to make the same mistake she had. I asked if she would be willing, just once, to tell her story to a frightened young woman before it was too late. Renata called me within the hour. And what she told me was worse than the court records. She'd been a widow. Trent had spent 6 months courting her, isolating her from her grown kids, telling her they were jealous and controlling. Then he'd talked her into pledging her late husband's house against a guaranteed development deal. She'd lost $90,000 and nearly lost the house itself. "He told me my own children were the enemy," she said, her voice thin over the phone. "He's very good at being the only person you're allowed to trust." Same script, word for word. "Your family is jealous. They're trying to turn you against me. I'm the only one who really loves you." I arranged a second meeting. Not lunch this time. I asked Crystal to come to my condo, to stand inside the home she thought was being stolen from her, and I had Renata there waiting. Crystal walked in braced for a fight with me. Instead, she found a stranger, a kind-faced woman in her 60s, who looked at her with terrible recognition and said, "Honey, did he tell you your family was jealous of you? Did he tell you to keep the LLC paperwork quiet? Did he tell you not to let your sister read it?" I watched my sister's face come apart. Every line Renata named was a line Crystal had already heard. And this time, she cried. "He has the form," Crystal whispered. "I gave him the condo folder. He said he'd handle the title side." "Diana, what did I sign? What did I sign?" "Nothing that can hurt you," I said. Because the one thing he never understood, the one thing none of you understood, is that the title was never yours to give him. I held the meeting on the morning of December 31st. I chose the conference room at my own firm, not Paul's grand corner office, but the working room where I'd spent 12 years of my life, the room where I knew exactly which chair caught the light and where the title documents would lie flat on the long table. I wanted my family on my ground for once. I wanted them to see, finally, the place where my capability actually lived. They came because I told them there was paperwork to sign, and my mother heard the word paperwork and assumed it meant she'd won. Crystal came because I'd asked her to, and because something in her had cracked open and not yet closed. My father came because my mother came. And Trent came because a man like Trent cannot resist a room where a transaction might happen. He walked in last, in a suit a half-size too sharp, carrying a leather folio and the wide, easy smile of a man who believes he's about to close. "Diana," he said, "I'm so glad you came around. This is exactly the kind of grown-up conversation this family needs." "Sit down, Trent," I said. "All of you, please." Paul sat quietly at the end of the table, saying nothing, a legal pad in front of him. Trent clocked him, hesitated for a half-second, and then decided a lawyer in the room was a sign of seriousness rather than danger. That was his first mistake of the morning. It would not be his last. I laid the first document on the table. "This," I said, "is the recorded title to the property at Bellwether Lane, certified copy, pulled from the County Registry of Deeds this week. I'd like everyone to read the ownership line." My mother glanced at it. "Diana, we don't need to." "Read it, Mom." She read it, her lips moved. Diana Marie Whitfield, sole owner. And I watched the first thread of doubt enter my mother's face. Not guilt, not yet, but the dawning awareness of a woman who had built a decision on a fact that had just turned out not to be a fact at all. "The paperwork you wrapped up at Christmas," I continued, calm as still water, "was not a deed. It was a document with no notarization, no recording, and no signature from the title holder, that's me. In plain terms, it was a piece of paper that said nothing and changed nothing. You cannot gift what you do not own. You never owned it. You gave me $4,000 11 years ago. I have the card. It bought you my gratitude, which you have always had. It did not buy you a building." "This is absurd," Trent said, leaning forward, switching smoothly into salesman cadence. "Diana, with respect, the spirit of the family's intent here is what matters, and we can absolutely structure something that honors everyone's contribution. If we put the property into an entity, like I've been telling Crystal." "Let's talk about the entity, Trent." I laid down the second document. "This is the LLC formation paperwork you prepared. The one you told my sister was routine. The one you told her to keep quiet. The one you told her I'd be difficult about." I slid it toward him. "I'd like you to explain to everyone at this table what happens, in your structure, after the property is placed into this LLC." His smile held, but it stopped reaching his eyes. "It's a standard asset protection vehicle." "It's collateral," I said. "The next step, the step you took with Renata Salas, and with the man you owe $31,000 to, is to pledge the property against a loan for an investment partnership. And when the partnership fails, as it always fails, the property is gone, and you walk away owing nothing because your name was never on a single deed." I laid down the third and fourth documents. 2 unpaid civil judgments. 2 prior victims. One of whom my sister met 3 days ago. The room was silent. My father had gone gray, and then I did the thing I'd brought them there to witness. I turned to Crystal. "You don't have to do anything," I told her gently. "I'm not going to make you choose in front of everyone, but I want you to know you can choose. He told you we were jealous. He told you we'd turn you against him. He told you he was the only one who really loved you. Renata heard those exact words. So did the others. It's a script, Crystal. You're not the love of his life. You're the next address on a list." For a long moment, my sister didn't move. Trent reached for her hand under the table. I saw it, that practiced little gesture of ownership. And Crystal pulled her hand away. She stood up. Her voice shook, but it didn't break. "I gave you the condo folder," she said to him. "I trusted you with my family's, with my sister's home, and you were going to take it and leave me with the debt. She picked up the LLC paperwork off the table, and very deliberately, she tore it in half. "I'm not signing anything. Ever. Get out." Trent's mask finally slipped. The warmth drained from his face and left something flat and reptilian behind. "You're all making a huge mistake," he said, standing, snatching his folio. "You have no idea what you're walking away from." "On the contrary," Paul said, speaking for the first time mildly, without looking up from his legal pad. "We have a very detailed idea. I've been taking notes. Ms. Salas has agreed to amend her filing. And the registry has been notified that a fraudulent transfer document was circulated bearing the Whitfield name. I'd retain counsel. If I were you, Mr. Calloway, you'll want it." Trent looked around the room, at the documents, at the lawyer, at the 4 members of a family who were, for the first time in any of our lives, standing on the same side of a table. Then he left, and the door clicked shut, and that ordinary little sound was the most satisfying thing I have ever heard. I had sold the condo 2 days before that meeting. That's the part I hadn't told any of them, the part the headline of my own life buried the lead on. While my family thought I was sulking, I'd quietly accepted an offer. A clean, all-cash deal from a young couple expecting their first child, $358,000, closing scheduled for the second week of January. By the time my mother sat in that conference room reading my name on the title, the home she'd tried to give away was already promised to someone else entirely. I want to be honest about why I sold it. It wasn't spite, though I won't pretend spite wasn't in the room. It was that I understood, sitting at my kitchen table on Christmas night with my brass key in my hand, that the condo had stopped being a home the moment my family decided it was a thing to be distributed. A key only means something when the door behind it is yours in every sense. That door wasn't anymore, so I let it go on my terms at my price to people who'd actually live in it, and I kept every cent because every cent was mine and had always been mine. The brass key I kept. I still have it on the same worn leather fob hanging on a hook by my new front door. It doesn't open anything now. I keep it anyway, the way you keep a scar, not because it hurts, but because it's true. Trent Calloway's unraveling was not loud. It was the slow, grinding karmic kind, which I've come to believe is the only kind that lasts. Renata amended her complaint, and with my professional knowledge guiding the paperwork, 2 of his former students who'd been too ashamed to speak finally did. A local reporter who covered consumer fraud picked up the thread of Calloway property mastery, and the seminars dried up overnight once the search results changed. The last I heard, he'd left the state owing money in 3 of them, his white smile selling nothing to no one. No dramatic arrest, just the quiet collapse of a man who'd run out of people willing to believe him. My parents and I are not fully healed, and I've made peace with the fact that we may never be. My mother apologized, eventually, in her own bent way. I suppose we got some of the details wrong, which is as close to "I'm sorry, I tried to take your home" as Marie Whitfield will ever come. My father apologized properly, with tears in my kitchen, and I forgave him because his only crime was silence, and I know what it costs a quiet man to finally speak. I've stopped expecting them to see me clearly, but I've also stopped needing them to, and there is a strange, spacious peace in that. Crystal is the surprise. My sister, who took for 30 years, called me a week after that meeting and asked if she could buy me dinner. She paid. She'd gotten a job, a real one, that she actually showed up to. We don't talk about Trent. We talk about other things now, small, ordinary things, and slowly, carefully, like 2 people learning a language neither of us was taught, we are becoming sisters in a way we never quite managed when we were children. It isn't a fairy tale. It's better than that. It's real, and it's chosen, and it's ours. I bought a small house in the spring. Smaller than the condo, with a garden out back and a crooked apple tree the previous owners couldn't be bothered to prune. I prune it myself now, on Sunday mornings, with coffee going cold on the step beside me. And every so often, I glance at the dead brass key by the door, and I think about the woman who stood in a paid-off kitchen 11 Christmases in the making, and I want to tell her, hold on. The people who underestimate you are about to teach you exactly how much you're worth. She didn't need a deed to prove she owned her life. She just needed to remember that she always had.